Can you hear me, Jim?
I can hear you just fine. And we began, amazingly enough, I like when we add the countdown thing, because the side effect, when you don't have the countdown thing in front of this, it will automatically, the first minute or two, it just simply says 0 viewers, because there's that link up that it takes before it gets everybody synced. So I always, they're staring at the screen, not knowing if anybody's there. Because the countdown runs now, we went live with 7 people in the queue. And just looking over some people here, we got Michael Hodges with us. Hey, Michael, good to see you. Welcome back. We're going to have to talk all about your vacation tomorrow.
Yes.
Alexandria, good night or good afternoon. Good night.
Hey, Alexandria.
Through.
Hey, Michael.
And let's see if there's anybody else, because I don't want to miss anybody. I am notorious for this. It only shows me so much, and then it scrolls off the screen. And I always have to be rolling back. And the software that we use here normally, I would expect it to give me an overlay. And it says there is an overlay, but the overlay doesn't work. So I have to do it the old-fashioned way to see what's in there. Because I'm a cheapskate, don't want to pay for more expensive broadcast things.
You're thrifty, Jim, not cheap.
Thrifty. Okay, I will take that. I'll take that as a win any way I can get it. For those of you who are following along with Roger and I today, we are going to be doing a watch party with The Naked Time. Going to be some interesting things, I think, to bring in there. Another one of those real early filmed episodes. And unique in that I think it was called The Naked Now in The Next Generation. So, I mean, there was a deliberate throwback episode in Next Gen that I don't remember if it was Data. I don't think it was Data. I don't know. But one of the crew members remembered hearing about somebody dying in a shower with their clothes on. And that was the thing that triggered it. So I'm looking forward to that. This is, of course, the episode that establishes for the first time that there is something ethereal between Nurse Chapel and Spock. Yep. I think we also see it. Obviously, it's really explored in Amok Time, but I think there's a moment in here, if I'm trying to remember correctly, that it shows up as well, which would sort of make sense. It's all the removing the inhibitions and stuff like that of everybody. All right, see what other housekeeping things. We'll start about 15 minutes after the hour. The link is watchtrek-world.com. It will take you to Pluto. So by all means, it'll actually take you to Pluto, the TV service, not Pluto, the planet, just in case you were wondering. It's going to come up. It might ask you to join or log in. You can ignore all that, and it'll just take you right to it and play it anyhow. If you are in the Great White North, it will work, and it'll take you in, but you won't see a Star Trek there, because apparently it's not on Pluto up in Canada, or if it is on Pluto, the links that I have are geographically bound, so it brings up nothing. You have to search on your own. I received a comment this week, and I just haven't had a chance to check on it, but I received a comment this week from someone who said they had just started watching the original series again on Netflix. And we know that since Paramount has had the real big cash problem, which has resulted in them being sold to Skydance or whatever it is, they have pulled Star Trek properties off of Paramount Plus, and they've licensed them out so that they can actually start making money on them again. Whenever they show it, all they're doing is ranking up expenses and no additional income. So it might even be on Netflix. For those of you who just can't bear to watch 2 screens at once, because one screen is hard enough, when we begin it, I will actually bring up a 3/4 screen image here in the live chat that will look at screen grabs that go all the way through. I think there's one every 10 seconds. There'll be a little timer in the bottom corner so that you can actually see how far into the episode we are if you're trying to sync with what you have at home. And the screen grabs keep me out of trouble with CBS and Paramount, because they don't like it when you rebroadcast their stuff. But a series of screen grabs every 10 seconds, go figure. That doesn't really count anymore. Whatever it is that makes me leave alone. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention, Jim, Alexandria pointed out, it made a great comment just a minute ago about she loves this episode because this is the first episode where we really get to see Spock's logic kind of stripped away from him,
Yes.
and with contracting this disease or this affliction, and you get to see him cry. I don't know I'm not sure what in the series of way the episodes were shot, how this one was shot, but when this is fairly early in the first season as far as the episode goes, the airing goes, and it's unique in that she's right. We get to see Spock's emotions forced to the surface, and you get to see his character develop. It's one of the best episodes for Spock's character, really, for any of them.
I agree.
You see more people with the emotions exposed.
Yeah, they definitely the Paradise Syndrome and the one I was talking about Amok Time.
Amok Time, yes.
Very good Leonard Nimoy episodes.
Absolutely.
There's just so many things that happen in Star Trek in the TV series that Nimoy was responsible for. That it just you talk about a team effort between Nimoy and Gene Toon and everything else. And I remember in particular the scene about Spock crying in The Naked Time. It's even more poignant when you take in consideration, as which we will watch it in a moment. But he's crying because he never told his mother he loved her.
Right.
I focused so much, which we know is true for his character. He focused so much on being the perfect Vulcan for his father.
Yes.
That he cut her, unfortunately, emotionally out.
Right.
I think Amanda understood, and the only reason I base that on really is from Star Trek 4, when the computer keeps asking him, "How do you feel?" and he goes to his mother, says, "I don't understand," and she goes, "Well, the computer knows you're half human. It knows you have feelings."
Yes.
He became more emotionless and less emotional controlled the longer you move through the Star Trek TOS universe, which is really kind of interesting, because you would think it would have been the other way around. Right. But he actually is the concept that we understand that says that they have emotions, very powerful emotions, and it's everything they do to keep them in check. They didn't explore that enough in the original series.
I totally agree, and I think too, Spock, as his character develops throughout the TOS, the original series, he almost overcompensates for the fact that he's half human. It's like he's got to be able to prove to the world that to the universe that he is a Vulcan and not considered human. So he almost overcompensates in many episodes for that.
Yeah. So they're doing a pretty good job with it. I know not everybody's cup of tea is anything coming out post Enterprise, but I think they're doing a pretty good job with the Spock that is in Strange New Worlds is not the Spock from Captain Kirk. It's the Spock from Christopher Pike and the original Cage. So they're going back to the original roots of what Roddenberry had thought he was going to do had he still kept number one on the bridge. She was the one that was in control of her emotions. So they can't completely change that because Vulcans are Vulcans.
Right.
I think it's really interesting because it shows that the character has got a lot of growing up to do, for lack of a better word, at this point. And I agree with you, Alexandria, exactly when I talk about the comment about his mother. There's not a human being alive. Hi, Brian. There's not a human being alive that didn't get a tug on the heartstrings when you hear that. Because no matter how touchy-feely your family was or was not growing up, whether or not they expressed your love for each other physically or just assumed they always knew, there were certain universal themes that were always there, including the reverence and love of your parents.
Absolutely.
Some families show it freely. Other parents, some families repress it because it doesn't fit in with their. We do have a lot of people in today's world that are exceedingly tactile phobic. I don't know how else to describe it. We are far more concerned with protecting our personal space today than we ever were growing up.
Right.
Now you've got people who physically and emotionally get uncomfortable if you get too close to them.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is
Totally
unfortunately
agree.
one of the things that plagued Vic on Strange New Worlds. I'm sorry, on Star Trek Continues. Okay,
Yes.
was that Vic was raised very much the same way I was, and I mean,
Yep.
you want to
Indeed.
talk about if you want to talk about a guy that hugs strangers, go looking up a guy. You'll find him in Wikipedia, and some of you might actually even remember him. His name was Leo Buscaglia, and he was a doctor. And he did this tour all around the country, the speaking engagement tour. And his thing was he hugged everyone he ever came to. And he talked about that. He said it's because he came from an extremely New York Italian family.
Yes.
And he said everything is touch. Everything is touch to those people. He says, no matter what you watch, you're going to see they hug each other, and that was the way he was raised. And it was fascinating to see that. And then I never knew what became of him after the 80s when I used to see him. He's sort of like Gallagher. Everybody still might remember him, but he's no longer
Right.
the attraction that he was.
Right.
So there are a lot of people our age or older that are extremely tactile, which is why I've never really given any weight or thought to people who say that Vic was doing it for anything other than
Yes.
this is how you greeted friends. I mean,
Yes.
It's so, but we're different about that. People today are different about
Are
that.
different. Yes, absolutely. So
And
one thing,
go ahead.
I'll just say, I think our society today, I think technology and our cell phones, where everybody's disconnected physically from each other and everything is done through their phone or through technology, it takes away that personal interaction, and everything becomes cold and sterile, to where I think that's what generates that personal space thing, where back in the day when there was no internet and no smartphones and things of that nature, Jim, I think we're from the same generation, and that when you met your best friend, you gave him a big bear hug. I mean, that was, we were happy to see each other, and there was nothing meant by it other than friendship. We've lost that ability to be able to express friendship through a hug, and because it's not considered politically correct anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you're dead on there, and I'll use a perfect example. Was when we met for the very first time together at WonderFest. Yep. One of the things that's always hardest for me, and especially now since the world can take it two different ways, trying to get a read on people over who gets the handshake and who gets the hug.
Yes,
okay?
Absolutely.
And so if you just got a handshake from me when you're out there, doesn't mean that I still don't love you dearly, but I didn't feel comfortable breaching the personal space. And today, for me, it's like I never breached somebody's personal space, period. But when you and I first met, your reaction was exactly the same as mine instantly. And it's like, so very natural hug, and it will be again. That making that call of who do I hug and who do I don't hug has nothing to do with how much you like somebody.
Right.
It has everything to do with how you feel they're comfortable interacting.
Absolutely.
Michael Buscaglia passed away on June 12th, 1998. I am very sorry about that. He appeared to be a good person back in the times when we took people at face value, and that didn't always work out for everybody. I mean, just look at Richard Speck, the serial killer. So taking people at face value doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
But absolutely fascinating.
Absolutely.
So we are coming down to a little bit less than a minute before I'm actually going to launch the thing over here. So just to recap for everybody that was on, that might have joined a little bit later. But anyhow, I'm going to be showing the episode complete with time boxes at the bottom in like one every 10-second clips. The watch.trek-world.com will take you automatically to Pluto and launch it up. It is on Pluto, the remastered CGI edition. Sorry. The version that we're going to be watching with the screenshots is the remastered non-CGI edition.
Jim, one thing I wanted to throw out there, and I don't know if anybody's had the same experience I did, besides all the wonderful acting in this episode, the very last, towards the end, where Kirk is in the briefing room and gets emotional and everybody leaves. When we first saw Star Trek 3, when the Enterprise is burning in the atmosphere, and he turns to Bones and he says, "What have I done?" And my immediate thought went back to this episode at the end when he says, "I'll never lose you." He's talking about the Enterprise. He's like, "I'll never lose you." And now every time I watch this episode and that scene comes on, I think ahead to Star Trek 3 when he did what he had to do, which was destroy the Enterprise to keep the Klingons from getting it. It's just that tagging back and forth is just perfect. I mean, that the universe.
I thought they did it. They handled that really well.
I do too.
I got a little bit disappointed after that it seems to become now that it seems to be that they can blow up Enterprises from that point on and not have an emotional impact.
Right.
So I mean, the D crashes in Generations, I think it was. Enterprises have this. Even the refit ended up getting replaced with that was the one that burned actually. Getting replaced by the Yorktown. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start.
Oh, yep.
Ta-da! Here's the work stream. Let's see if I can get this right. Now I'm going to go over and start the video.
That's a good point, Alexandria. Yes. Physical affection is also impacted by social cultural climate as well. So.
Yes. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, I think Alexandria is she's not Gen 1. Forgive me, Alexandria, completely messed up. But I think weren't you and I talking that you had discovered it much later and then went back to watch TOS after you discovered the others and got involved in it? Forgive me if I'm getting you convinced with somebody else. But I had that conversation recently.
No, I think you're right, Jim. I think she did mention that. Yes. They're sacrificing everything.
Yep.
Save Spock. Yep. Absolutely, Michael.
The price was too high.
Yes.
That was Spock apparently has that effect on a lot of people over the course of the TV series. I mean, we know how much Kirk loved him. Hell, we know how much McCoy loved him, even though they fought all the time. Yep. McCoy loved him enough that he would have done it all over again. Catra. We've seen, in Strange New Worlds, we've seen Pike's attachment to him.
Yep.
We saw Picard's attachment to him.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because I don't know if that was ever. The intention for the way they wrote the character, or if that is just our reaction to the way that they wrote his character and carried it forward. That all of the secondary characters automatically feel a strong kinship with him, no matter what country and what show.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Alexandria. Apparently, you were not the one I was thinking about. But
I thought she was too, but maybe not. So
it just sometimes, and I hate to say it, but I am absolutely horrible with names too. People can introduce me 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
This right here. Okay, it skipped, but you can see the exposed hand. Okay.
Yes.
Dude, what the heck? You are down there in a hazmat suit, and you're going to, and then not only that, you're going to reach around, and you're going to go over
take my glove off.
near that thing, okay, which you can't see because you just conveniently got on the floor on the wrong side. And it also, I don't know if I mentioned this when I did my evaluation, it actually goes against gravity because it's shooting up to his hand.
Yes.
Instead of coming down, yet they've never indicated in the episode that there was anything that indicated that the virus was aware or anything like that. It was just a virus. But yeah, and then he puts the glove back on. What the heck?
Yeah. Michael brings up a great point. Why do their suits look like they were made from a shower curtain?
Because they were. They couldn't afford bubble wrap, I guess.
And not just any shower curtain, but a really cheap shower curtain. I mean, it's cool looking, but it's really thin. It looks really thin too.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, some of the times when they try to extrapolate what the future would look like, when Roddenberry does it, sometimes he's dead on, and other times, I'm trying to think, what is a technology that we really wanted in Star Trek that still has not come to pass? I mean, theoretically, we have universal translators.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good question.
we
Well,
have we don't have
trans
phasers, but we have lasers. Go ahead.
yeah, transporting. I mean, materialization from one point to another. I guess would be one. Transporters. Michael. Yeah, Michael got it. Transporters.
Yep. Yeah, that's the biggie, I guess.
They got that motel shower curtain material. It's interesting because those suits almost the material or the pattern of those suits almost look like a kind of a weird offshoot of the material that they use on the sickbay beds. It's kind of that sparkly.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of an interesting design.
Yep. Yeah, the sources could have been very similar. I mean, I know the fabric that they used on the transporter beds. I heard that they didn't make that anymore, so they, because I think Star Trek Continues and Star Trek New Voyages had to come up with their own source or
Yes.
whatever. But very well may be that the same fabric house or the same people sold both fabrics.
Right. Right.
Because under normal circumstances, when you see something like that on TOS, the odds are it'll be used somewhere else in another show as well. Because they didn't
Right.
have them do a lot of. They would just simply go out. What can you show me that is futuristic looking enough that people won't say, "Oh, I've seen this a million times."
Yes.
So the hazmat suit never was all that impressed with. However, I did sort of like the body suit they used in the Tholian Web.
Tholian Web. Yeah, I did too.
I thought they were kind of neat. Still, it may be a little bit bulky than what we would like it to be. I thought it was still neat.
This is really the only episode in TOS that I can think of off the top of my head where you actually see them wearing black undershirts.
The undershirt.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you think of the episodes where Corporal Mike Maneuver, where Kirk is, doing his physical at the beginning, and he's just shirtless. That was.
Yep.
But it almost implies that their uniforms have a wider collar, and that what you're seeing at the top is the undershirt, but it's actually not. They wore a dark undershirt underneath the uniform shirt, which actually had a black band around the collar as well. So.
Wow. No, I did not know that, Patrick. Patrick says, "Do you guys know this George Takei story?" I do have a George Takei story though to tell.
Well,
I might actually have told this to you, Roger. Maybe even Michael during one of our patron calls. I work at Nissan, and another lady that's about my age works there as well, and her family lived out on the West Coast at the same time that George's family did. And so they were involved as extras in the Green Berets. So they met George during that time frame, and her family and George became extremely close friends.
Yes.
And so Sharon brought in, her name was Sharon Bowling. She brought in photos for me, I guess around 10 years ago or whatever, of her mother's living room. And right in the living room, just sitting on the couch and talking in the chairs and stuff like that, were George, Michelle, and Walter. And apparently the entire secondary cast, including Jimmy from time to time, were all well enough acquainted with them that they spent a lot of time together back in those time frames.
Yep.
It's wild. It's another one of those. I think we talked about this I think we talked about it with Michael. I think it was when we were at Wonderfest. It's one of those 6 degrees of separation things.
Yes, absolutely.
It's crazy how you can actually be within 5 or 6 people of making a connection with any other person on the planet. If you know which ones to connect to, which is next to impossible. You have to reverse engineer it. But it is crazy. We really are in today's society that well connected with each other.
Yes, we are. Absolutely.
I guess that's sort of crazy considering what we just talked about a minute ago. We are that well connected, but we are still estranged.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's a unique situation, Jim, too, where we can, we've called each other and video chatted, many times, and it's interesting because we live so far away from each other. But like I said, I honestly, I probably chat with you more than I do my own brother, who's, half an hour away from here. I mean, and not by choice. It's just the way it is. Our interests run so much alike.
Yeah.
And that we've hit it off so well that we discuss things all the time. And I love getting chat calls from you, where we can find time to jump on and just talk for a little bit,
They're not. He's talking about the electric razor heads. Michael says those helmets look like. Trying to think of the name of the company. It wasn't Norelco. It was
Norelco?
It started with an M. The commercial was it was an electric razor that used the grills like that. The commercial back in the 80s was I liked the razor so much I bought the company.
Yes.
CEO. And I can't think of his name. Michelin? That's a tire company.
That's a tire company.
Somebody save us, please. You can just throw the word out there.
I thought it was Norelco, but maybe not.
Norelco uses the triple heads.
Yeah.
So we always call the Santa Claus riding in them at every Christmas time.
Yeah, or the snowman.
Yep.
The snowman riding in the snow drifts and stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
it's going to drive me nuts.
It is me now too, because I know exactly what you're talking about.
Briefly, going back to the undershirt, since you brought that up too, because I actually brought that up in the video that I did on Where No Man Has Gone Before.
Right.
Because there was a scene early in where Gary Lockwood was wearing the undershirt.
Yes.
And then there was another scene later on where he was not. And it was literally just a situation of his shirt hiked up farther, I think, than they expected it to.
Yeah.
They really caught it. But yeah, the black T-shirts were around. I think we're going to see them a couple more times. I think I remember them. But your interesting point with Jim Kirk, I mean, because it's not just the Corbomite maneuver, but also the beginning of Charlie X.
Yes. Yep.
Any excuse they had in the beginning to have Kirk go shirtless on Star Trek, they just figured fans would eat that up, which they did, judging from all the fanzines back then.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, Michael. We owe you a steak dinner. Yes. Remington.
It was Remington. It was, yeah.
I could remember the M, couldn't remember the rest.
Thanks, Michael.
But yes, the helmet part of that very, very much reminiscent of that, of the Remington razor.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Now, there's something here, and we've all seen the episodes. I'm not necessarily giving away state secrets here, but not Riley, but the other guy, the one that got it, the idiot down.
Oh, yeah.
He ends up dying, if I remember. He kills himself or something like that. We'll probably find out more here in a minute, but it was interesting. His reaction was different from everybody else's. Everyone else's reaction was the release of an inhibition, which caused them to act out their strongest thoughts and desires.
Correct. Okay? Yep.
So, but his was not. He didn't react that way. And then there's another aberration as well in the episode, and that was it was clearly established that physical touch transferred the virus.
Right.
You have another way to show us that. Yet, when George has his scene on the bridge from the Three Musketeers and he's doing his best to be D'Artagnan,
yep, I know where you're going with this.
He actually swoops his arm around Uhura and pulls her up to him. She came in. I mean, she's literally, her hands are all over his side and back.
Yeah.
She never got the virus at all. She was completely exempt, and no one noticed that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's crazy because it's just, in my opinion, it's one of those writer's gaffes. Most of the things that I'm finding in the original episodes, these aren't deliberate mistakes. These are things that happen because they were on a very tight budget. They didn't have a whole lot of time. And especially in the first season, which you got to admit, some of those critically acclaimed episodes are in the first season. And Star Trek is very, very proud of the fact that it used real science fiction authors most of the time to write those episodes. But in the beginning, those science fiction authors really had to be trained on how to make a TV show. Harlan Ellison, number one example.
Yep.
So sometimes things like the Uhura slip up, that I believe is something that came up in the filming that was not necessarily in the original script or in the original story outline. The writer probably never thought of physical contact with Uhura, so therefore she never got sick. And then nobody ever put two and two together that what should have jumped out to McCoy immediately was that, okay, who has come in contact with everybody else? You know, the contact tracing that we all did for COVID.
Right. I wonder too, Jim, if it's a situation where the original script had more to it. Maybe there was maybe there was something else about the script in that scene that ended up getting cut for time purpose, and that created the situation where she's in physical contact with it, but yet doesn't catch the virus. I don't know. You know,
I want to say that isn't the line Michael's referring to where he calls her fair maiden and she responds
yes.
back, neither.
Said, sorry, neither.
Yep, I think that's Michael. I agree wholeheartedly. That's really, in my opinion, I think that's the best line she has in the entire series.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's very. Go ahead.
When you're younger, when I was younger, it didn't dawn on me what she was talking about. As I got older and I understood, you know, males and females, and then of course gender, and then also, you know, skin color and ethnicities. Then it dawned on me. Everything kind of fell into place.
Yeah, absolutely amazing the way that was written. I don't know who
yes.
I don't know who coined it. I don't know if it was done. I don't think Kuhn was involved by that point because he was not there from the beginning with Bob Justman and Gene. So I'm not sure who was actually that. But I love that line. I think it actually completely encompasses the character that she was trying to portray for the remainder of her. I'm
sorry, this is very important.
All right.
Correct.
You are on to what?
I know.
People. Okay.
I'm sorry, lots of people.
Yeah. That's not an emergency, and that's fine. That's fine.
Sorry, everybody.
Do you still want what we talked about? No? Okay. For those of you dying of curiosity, my wife had originally placed a dinner order with me to order something from Subway to have it DoorDash to us after we got off here. And she just discovered that she had gone browsing in the kitchen and was eating something for dinner before she realized that she was now eating dinner and didn't need Subway.
Oh, Michael made a comment about Dr. McCoy loves salt and pepper with his autopsies.
Yes. Yep.
Shatner's gut.
Yeah, the Shatner's gut. Yeah, definitely. He would begin the season trim because he would exercise to get in shape before the season started again, and he would gain weight all the way across. And yeah, it was just the way it was.
Well, too, I wondered too, Jim. Their schedule was nonstop. Once the season started and they started shooting, I don't know when he had time to exercise. Maybe it was a situation he just no longer had enough time in the day between shooting, because I think shooting would run 10, 12 hours a day sometimes. You know, and then you got to sleep. So when are you going to find time in there to exercise? You know. Yeah,
exactly. And yeah, the shooting, man, there was just so much that was that they had to do. And the books by Mark Cushman, These Are the Voyages, I think it is. Yep. They do a good job of letting you understand what a normal day of production was.
Yes, totally agree.
And there's two aspects that always warred in my head with each other. And one of them is that they constantly told us stories about 16-hour days.
Right.
But excuse me, they had to release the filming crew by 6 p.m. due to union rules.
Right.
So obviously, we had days where either union rules were ignored and not recorded somewhere,
right,
or the 16-hour days. Because like I remember Nimoy was at like 4 a.m. in the morning every day. I think for his makeup and stuff.
Makeup, yeah.
Shatner just walk right in, and they just gloss him up a little bit, give him a wig, and he's on his way.
Yeah.
Someone, it might have been Michael, I don't remember. Somebody sent a comment or factoid across one of the comments in the channel about the number of people who wore wigs.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And the number of times so they're beginning, I think it was the second or third season, and there's a letter from Justman to Roddenberry. I always love those memos.
I sent that to you the other day. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's like, okay, well, once again, Shatner's hair pieces are missing, and they're like $300. Nurse Chapel's hairpiece is missing. I knew she wore a wig because she's not naturally a platinum blonde. But what really caught me off guard was Michelle's wig was missing. She had asked to take it home with her after filming, and she'd bring it back, and she hadn't. So Justman was saying, either we charge these people for this, or we find something else, because it's entirely too expensive to let all these wigs walk off.
Right.
And I think the one that surprised me the most was Michelle, because it was never apparent, which means it was just very tastefully and very well done. It was never apparent to any of us that she was wearing a wig, as much as we would know sometimes that Shatner's toupee was visible. And then, like I say, Majel's hair color was always brunette. So, yeah, it was interesting. I didn't realize that at all.
Well, and then on top of that, I think, as I recall, that letter it was between the second and third seasons, I believe. However, if it had been first season yet, or between first and second season, if they were going to continue with Janice Rand's character, you knew she had to have been wearing a hairpiece, because that big beehive thing she was wearing with the lattice crossed hairs, and it had to have been a wig. It would have taken hours to actually, if you had enough hair, to wrap that the way it was.
Beehive hairdo. That's that little beehive hairdo from the 50s or whatever.
Yep.
They actually had the hair was like weaved, like
weaved,
fabric weaved.
Yeah.
George has been handed perfecting thing.
Yeah.
Not only did the entire world discover that Sulu was not safe with a sword, the folks that worked at Desilu discovered that George was not safe with a sword. He apparently took this really, really, really over.
Yeah.
And somebody asked a question. This is pretty interesting. Notice he's climbing on the ladder. We have a couple episodes of Star Trek where we see people coming down and going down.
Right.
And so the question was the set built on a raised elevated stage? Because how are they going down?
Right.
If you're sitting on the floor, how are these people climbing down? And the answer that seemed to be most popular was that there were certain areas around the set that apparently had pits that they could go down into, where they wouldn't have to, not the entire floor would have to be raised, but only that one particular section. And the belief was that ladder piece, by the way, there were a couple of things they could do to hide it, remove it, or conceal it, so it looked like it was in different places. But that was fascinating, because it never dawned on me to even wonder why. Hey, am I missing? Look at the guy in blue at the Navigator's pilot there. He has no insignia on?
He has no insignia. Yep, you are correct.
I missed that.
Neither does Leslie. Lieutenant Leslie didn't have his insignia on his either. They were both missing the insignia. I just now noticed that. That's good. That's a great call out, Jim. I never noticed that before.
Well, I stubbed. I love when Spock comes across "Love Humanity" on the wall and just sighs.
Just sighs, yeah.
Yeah, the insignia thing has come up before in a couple of the videos that I've done. Apparently, it was the costume union or whatever required that they all had to be resewn every night. It had to do, from what I understand, with the amount of times they were washed, and so that they might be puckering and wrinkling. So every night they would cut them off, and every morning they would sew on, or overnight, whatever. The next days would be prepared, and we have situations where, Spock's grabbing Sulu by the neck, and I think they even establish in the story that this is when Spock comes in contact with the virus. Even though, like I just said, Uhura just also touched George and didn't.
Right. Because they allude to the fact later when Spock goes into sick bay looking for, I think he was looking for McCoy or looking for somebody, or Kirk maybe, and Christine Chapel grabs him by the hand and tries to hold his hand,
Right.
and then he pulls away, and the look on his face and the way he's kind of got this stunned reaction, like he's just been infected, but in reality, he's already been infected earlier by probably come in contact with Sulu. So
Yep.
there was something.
Riley actually showed up on the bridge without his ensign stripes one time.
What's that?
Riley showed up in his red uniform on the bridge. Not Riley, the other guy, Leslie, showed up on the bridge. It was one of the episodes I just recently did one of the blooper videos on, because I call out to it. But he's on the bridge without his insignia. And it was just literally, sometimes I can't believe that it didn't get caught, because you've seen existing Polaroids that were taken at the end of each day. They would take a Polaroid of each character when they were in makeup or costume, and then supposedly the next morning you would use that Polaroid as the reference while you're fixing the actor up again.
Right.
I've seen the Polaroids show up from time to time in sale. I think there's actually quite a collection that was part of the Greg Jean collection that auctioned off last year. But they always do things like the shirts changing and the insignias being missing and stuff. And it's like, if you were really tracking continuity from yesterday, you would have known. You would think the actor would know. Hey, yesterday I wasn't wearing the wraparound yesterday. I was in my normal one. But everybody seems to have completely missed it when it happens.
Right. Have you seen photos of some of these original uniform shirts now, as what they look like now?
Yes.
After all the dry cleaning,
they have not aged well.
No, the blue shirts have turned like purple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get. Matter of fact, I got a bunch more of them. Yeah. I have been going out for research, of course, and more of these auction catalogs.
Oh, fantastic!
Auctioned off the Stephen Poe, the Roddenberry Stephen Poe battle cruiser. So this is March 31st, 2006. They actually auctioned off the Gorn, but they, as you leaf through some of these, now I buy them for Star Trek, obviously, but it really is an amazing time capsule. I love looking through them because of the things that tend to show up here that aren't Star Trek related, but that are just absolutely amazing. But I might actually have in this one a discolored.
I'd like to pick up a couple of those. I'm gonna have to be on the lookout for some.
Well, I do have I have a ton of these in PDF format. And I'll be putting them up in the Patreon area for the patrons to be able to get at. So far, I am seeing uniforms, but I'm not seeing any of the blue ones. Everything's red. Of course, that means it stayed red. But
that reminds me, Jim, I still have photos from Wonderfest that I need to get to you yet too. So I will do that tonight.
Yeah, because what's his name? David Alexander wants us to let him know when we get him up there in the group.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. But yeah, I love these things. They generally go for between $20 and $50. Now, the one which I do want to pick one up. I have the PDF of the Greg Jean collection, but they actually have the book version, and I mean his collection was insane. It was like that thick.
Oh yeah.
I'd like to get a hold of a copy of it, but they know what they've got because they sell it online $80 to $100 a copy. This you were asking about last week, Roger.
Yes.
Sorry, I did not have it in time to show you, but for those of you who are following along or whatever, there are a series of Trek World promotional items that we make up for like conventions and for our supporters that are not on the normal store. So, and the hat is one of them. I don't think there's a hat on the normal store at this point. And then obviously some of the nicer polos for some of the convention effects that we go to. However, on the store, you will find pillows, T-shirts. I think there's a polo, a hoodie. There's all sorts of stuff, depending on what your clothing fetish happens to be.
Well, the ball caps are good for me, for those of us that are follically challenged. So
Yes.
love mankind.
So interesting, because Michael just pointed out something that really has caused a lot of grief in the past couple years. The white-handled phaser.
Yes.
There were 6 of them, I believe. Might have been 8, but I think it was 6. They were the original phasers that were made by the Desilu prop department.
Yes.
They paid $7,000 for them or something. It was an ungodly amount of money they paid for these phasers. They had little to no detail on the sides. They could not be used for close-ups. Roddenberry was pissed. I don't blame him. They really were that bad. And so over a period, so he immediately then goes out and has Hua Chang use the designs that Matt Jeffries has drawn up and make the hero phasers that we know and love. They ended up with 3 types of phasers on the TV show. They had the heroes. They had what were called mid-grade. And then they had the stunt phasers. The stunt phasers having the least amount of marking on them. Therefore, they could not be used for any kind of even distance shot. They worked out great if you wanted to show a security guy with a phaser hanging from his belt or something that nobody can see really clearly. That worked okay. It was believed, and I think may still be believed, that all of the phasers had been repainted by like the 6th episode of Star Trek.
Yes. I heard that too.
But they have shown up at auction. And that always has raised eyebrows because officially they're not supposed to exist anymore. They're supposed to be
right.
But they are showing up at auction. They are selling for large amounts of money by collectors that that believe or buy into the provenance. And sometimes some of these phasers defy explanation. And the best example I can give you is there was the first TOS Hero phaser, and that was actually owned by Greg Jean. In 2013, he authenticated a second TOS Hero phaser that the story was that the Phaser 2 hand grip came from somebody that had been given it by Hua Chang, and the Phaser 1 piece had been given to this person by a crew member, not a cast member, but a crew member that had worked on an episode in Star Trek Season 2. And that as the years went by, they became aware of each other and decided, hey, we can put these 2 together and sell them for a lot more money than separately. And they took it to Greg Jean. Greg Jean completely disassembled it, tore it down, and from that teardown, it was authentic. It was just, it doesn't get any better than this. He even noted how the Phaser 1s were completely interchangeable between the 2.
Right.
There are a ton of people out there that believe that no matter what Greg said, it was a fraud, that there was only one hero phaser, then that the other, this was a fraud, so on and so forth. An auction fraud is a very real thing today.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it is.
What's really interesting is they made this, a lot of people stood on this. There's never been any other hero phasers in existence other than the one that Greg Jean had. But then, like 2 years ago, another hero shows up. But this one, the provenance is undeniable, even though it doesn't fit the narrative. It came from Nichelle Nichols. She had been given it and kept it all of those years, never sold it, and never even really talked too much about it. Occasionally she would mention it to some people or whatever, but they had all the documentation and paperwork to show how they acquired it after she passed, including a letter from her stating how she had received it. So it's kind of crazy. These devices show up without necessarily being existing before.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. That's what I still love about the TOS, the series. I mean, we're still finding things out 50, 60 years later that we didn't know, from behind the scenes, from production, from the actors. I mean, it's amazing the knowledge that's out there and the experiences that are out there that we've never heard about.
Yep.
This many years later.
Michael brought up a really good point.
Yep.
That is true, and that is Nurse Chapel is wearing like a Red Cross, a medical emblem. Okay, she's not wearing a Starfleet thing. And then he goes on and says, the scene has a different context when you consider Strange New World season 2. So the relationship between these two, I have 2 points on that. The relationship between these two, the best explanation I can give you for this scene is go watch Strange New Worlds if you have. Okay. Christine's on the Enterprise, Spock's on the Enterprise. The medical emblem that Christine is wearing is explained away in Strange New Worlds. It was never explained anywhere else in the series, but she's not Starfleet. She's a civilian serving on the vessel. So in Strange New Worlds, she still has that emblem, and the canonical explanation is she's a civilian on assignment to that.
Yes.
Her specialty in Strange New Worlds is sort of like a molecular biology type of thing, which makes sense. We've seen this with Dr. Phlox in Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
The Denobian, exact same. A specialist at xenoculture, not a Starfleet person, but still on board a Federation starship or a Starfleet starship. Federation didn't exist.
Right.
The Enterprise. And they just fixed something else for Strange New Worlds. I was just talking about it in one of my videos. Romulus and Rom 2.
Oh, yes.
I just put up. I talk about how Kirk calls it Romulus, but then the screen comes up and says Romulus and Rom 2. And Remus has 5 letters. Rom 2 has 5 letters. So there was no, it was cheaper to put it as Rom 2. They deliberately put it there. So it's been recognized, actually, in the production offices for a while as a slip up between when they ordered the production piece and when they shot the episode.
Not the episode,
Strange New Worlds, they show that same quadrant space in Strange New Worlds, and they actually show Romulus, Remus, and Rami. Then what they did to fix it in canon was Romulus and Remus are the 2 twin planets. They got to be, because we talked about it not just in that episode, but throughout everything. I filmed a whole movie about it with Patrick Stewart. But rather than just simply saying that Rami was an aberration or a printing mistake, they created the 3rd planet in Strange New Worlds to explain that, okay, it really is the 2. That isn't. You can list all 3.
Right.
Interesting. They try to fix issues in canon.
That didn't make sense. Yeah. Certain things.
And sometimes it doesn't fit properly.
Right.
But they're not the only ones that did it.
No, definitely not.
Gene completely rewrote human history in Encounter at Farpoint. The whole concept of being on trial with Q.
Yes. Hey, SFF.
Howdy.
How's it going? Yeah.
I'll take you home.
One more time.
Yep, there we go.
Oh, wow.
I wonder how. You don't hear this very often, but I wonder how difficult or how much Nimoy had to go deep into character for that scene.
Yeah, I know. That's a good point. Whether he had to really psych himself out for it or not. I mean, that's an extremely emotional scene.
Exactly. It's the exact opposite of the Paradise Syndrome.
Yes. Exactly.
Where he said, for the first time in my life, I was happy. So it's the opposite. He knows he had something. He's acting happy. In this case, though, it's a soul-wrenching grief that's coming out of him.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well put, Jim.
And I've never really heard anybody refer to Nimoy as a character actor, but I think that the basic showing that scene shows he definitely had that in his repertoire, as did William Wyndon as, Matt Decker.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think a lot of people just don't realize the emotional gravity of that scene. Just a great,
This-
great.
And this scene here was between Kirk and Scotty is probably one of the best in the entire series. This is one of the best interactions between them. And if you want to get into the universe of the mechanics of Star Trek and you know the command and the engineering, this is a unique scene between the two of them where you know Kirk's right there alongside Scotty. You've got the commander of the Enterprise. You've got the lead engineer that knows more about it than the people who build it, working together, and they're both deep into the mechanics of what it takes to get the engine started, restarted after they were turned off. That scene, this whole episode impresses me with not just the writing, but the acting and the difference between the scenes and the closeness of the characters in every scene too. So much going on in this episode it's almost overwhelming at times.
Yes.
Michael, yeah, it's different to see Kirk so hands-on in engineering. That's I guess is what I was trying to say, is that this is the one episode where you really see him get involved, get down in the weeds with Scotty on what it takes to get the engines restarted.
Yep.
This one when employ the engines for entering the time warp. Yeah.
Yeah. And Alexander's right. You don't see Jim in engineering very often.
No.
There are a few occasions. I mean, he and the evil Kirk both show up in the engineering room.
Exactly.
So that it's recognized definitely as a strategic thing. But Alexandria brings up a good point, and that is that all command crews are rotated through all the different departments.
Absolutely.
And we see that very, very much so in Strange New Worlds, with Jim Kirk now, for the first time, being assigned the role as first officer on the Lexington.
Right.
Because we know where that's got to go in the next 9 years. But same thing. He's going to have jack of all trades, master of none kind of training aboard the Enterprise.
Yes. Well, you stop and think about it. Even if you think through the 79 episodes of the original TOS, how many episodes mention the different starships that James Kirk was involved in as he came up through the ranks? They talk about the Starship Republic. He was on the Republic, and that's mentioned in is that Court Martial? I think they mention it. And then the episode Obsession, he talks about being on the USS Farragut. Of course, he's commander of the Enterprise. So, Kirk was on board at least 4 or 5 different starships, just mentioned in original series.
Right.
Yeah, and the Farragut. Yeah, Michael brought it up in the Farragut. Yeah. Yeah, this scene, he talks about, of course, his inhibitions, are coming out. He's or let down, I should say. He's talking, his guards let down. He's talking about noticing Janice Rand.
Yep.
Captain's not permitted to notice her.
As it turned out, it was producers that were not permitted to notice her.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is such a sad story. It's
Yes,
just it's a sad beyond belief story that happened the way it did.
Absolutely.
It's one of those stories I would love to do a video on, type of thing, but just don't have the time frame to go into it, because Grace's life in Star Trek was anything but happy.
Oh, absolutely.
It got a little bit better towards the end for her.
Yes.
But the only time I've seen somebody who was actually public about how an acting experience changed their lives for the worst was Karen Black.
Yeah.
She had actually been nominated for an Academy Award prior to doing Trilogy of Terror. And, so Dan Curtis hires her for Trilogy of Terror, and neither one of them knew that when she was done with it, she would be forever associated with that movie and with horror movies.
Yes.
And it put an end to her illustrious career.
Yep.
And, she said for years after that, that she always resented it because it took her career away from her, and she was stuck in playing things like Mars Attacks and other little secondary.
She
fiction
was
horror.
in actually in the movie Burnt Offerings.
Yes.
Was I think that was right after, or shortly thereafter, Trilogy of Terror, I believe, in the 70s.
Yep.
So
Yeah, one of those made-for-TV movies. But yeah, she got. And I think it was another Dan Curtis movie as well.
yeah, I think you might be right.
But yeah, she said she always resented it. And it wasn't really until like the later years of her life that she was ready to say, she was happy the way her life turned out.
Yes. Michael. This is how it felt when I got my first COVID vaccine. Oh my.
The original vaccines didn't bother me, but the boosters were the only ones that had an effect with. Scared the living daylights out of me. The second night on every booster, my temperature would go to like 103. And then it would break in the middle of that second night every time. First time it happened scared the living heck out of me. Something I'm going to have to go to the hospital. Something's horribly wrong.
Right.
And then over the course of like an hour, because I'm a coward and didn't want to go to the hospital because something was horribly wrong. Well, over an hour, it literally, the fever cracked. You get in the cold sweats and you realize you've come through it. And then every time the booster after that, same thing. The second night is always a high fever.
Well, I never had that kind of an issue with the COVID vaccines or the boosters, but I recently just got a flu vaccine last fall for the first time. I'd had 2 before that, and both times I had a reaction to them. So I refused to get them. I was like, if I'm going to feel like crap after getting the vaccine, why do I, I hardly ever get the flu. And then I did get the wife and I did get the flu last December. It was horrible. The worst flu we'd had in 20 years, stomach flu. It was horrible.
So there's an interesting line out there of articles in some of the medical magazines. I can't remember exactly which ones off the top of my head, but the deal is this: post-COVID, the world is experiencing a surge in respiratory diseases,
viruses,
the flu and stuff like that. And in some cases, they are the total case numbers are like 10 times what they were pre-COVID.
Oh wow!
Like in the United States, we have influenza, which is currently 10 times the peak that it was before, and RSV.
RSV, yeah.
And I guess the real interesting thing, though, is that the cynic in me is thinking, oh, isn't that interesting that they're saying we have an RSV spike at the same time that RSV vaccines are showing up for the very first time because they're based off the mRNA stuff.
Right.
And what do I think the chance of coincidence is that a major advertising push to sell that vaccine, and oh, by the way, we're having a record number of cases.
Yeah.
So to go buy that vaccine seems pretty
coincidental.
Yeah.
SFF 87, yeah, he's right. Shatner really sells her. He does. I think.
I love that. I never in a million years think Shatner overreacted in any scene he had. He literally put himself in the character and played it that way, that emotional.
Yes.
And it's the only thing I've ever seen him do that in. To be perfectly honest, any other show I ever saw him in, maybe a little bit of Boston Legal, but I mean, there was not a whole lot of opportunity to explore anguish and pain and stuff like that in Boston Legal. It was just obvious that he loved playing Denny Crane. But
I was watching several Toss episodes last
that's
night.
going to be ring through my head forever now, Michael.
Yeah, exactly. I sat and watched several Toss episodes last night on Paramount Plus, and it's funny you mentioned that, Jim, because I was just thinking about that last night. I'm like, I've seen Bill Shatner play in, numerous television movies after Toss, and none of those movies or shows did he ever display the emotional range that he did in Toss until the Star Trek movies came out. But he
the death of Spock.
committed himself. he committed himself. Yeah, he committed himself so much during this original series that I just think that's his best work. I really do.
I agree. Yeah.
And the earlier when they showed him in the briefing room, and Kirk is really feeling the effects of the virus, and he
Camera.
he comes up to Scotty and he says, "Help," and I think ahead to the very last episode, which is one of my least favorite, which is Turnabout Intruder. And Scotty and McCoy are in the hall, and between the court-martial proceedings for Spock, and they're talking about, Kirk's frame of mind. And Scotty makes the comment, something to the effect of, I've seen the captain delusional. I've seen him break down in tears. I've seen him hysterical. Or have seen him, all these different moods. He goes, but I've never seen him red-faced hysterical like he was during these proceedings. And I think back, when I'm watching that episode, I think back to the Naked Time here, where he's in the briefing room and his guard is down, and that's one of those different emotional, elements of Kirk that he displays, and Scotty's been akin to because he's seen it, over the series episodes. Just some great writing back and forth between the original TOS episodes and canon in there, where things line up, they match up. We talk about so many times about where things don't always line up or don't always make sense, and then other times they really line up and they really make sense. So
yeah, there's one episode, and we're pretty much at the end here. The episode is stopped, so we'll work down here in a minute or two. But there's only one episode, and maybe you guys remember better than I do. But in Wolf in the Fold, when they question Scotty's frame of mind, because Scotty would never attack a woman, but when they reference his frame of mind, there's a throwaway comment about, well, it was a woman that was responsible for him being thrown against the bulkhead or something like that.
Yes.
And as far as I know, it was a direct reference to the Changeling. And I'm not aware of any other self-contained, set the menagerie aside, any other two episodes that actually referred to each other in any way.
Right.
And it always made me wonder why they even left the line in the episode, because they had tried to keep the episodes so they weren't tied to each other,
Right.
But who knows? Very interesting. I think it's one of those things I haven't seen in any other place in the original series, although it could be there and I just don't remember it.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. We were on the Department of Temporal Investigations in that channel once. Interesting. That's good. Yeah, I like that, Michael.
So I was reading something. Let me stop the. I was reading something this week that was pretty interesting. The cast of Enterprise, and I guess maybe because it was, maybe they felt their finale. They felt they'd been pretty much cheated out of. Okay, over the whole Riker and Troy, and the whole thing's been a holodeck simulation. They weren't happy at all with Daniels being the agent in Discovery. It was reviewed at the film in the very last episode that it was Daniels, the same temporal investigator guy that was in Enterprise.
Right.
And they weren't happy. I was really surprised. I was reading in social media their comments and stuff, and I don't understand the source of their unhappiness. But they did not like that idea at all.
Right.
And I think it was actually pretty good because for a variety of reasons. One, it ties the episodes together, and it's not the first time somebody's tried to tie something to Enterprise.
Right.
It gave a brilliant reason for creating the character so that David Cronenberg could play it, because Gen 1 will know who David Cronenberg is. Okay.
Right.
Nobody else will, because most of what we're used to, he was like what's the horror show producer that gave everybody their first start? We lost him a couple years ago. I can't think of his name right now.
Oh, yeah.
He made Little Shop of Horrors, so it was first
Yes,
for Jack
Corman.
Corman, Roger
Roger
Corman.
Corman. Yep.
So
Actually, I don't think it was that long ago. It was earlier this year or late last year, wasn't it? He passed, I believe. It wasn't that long ago.
yeah, because he was actually on the Joe Bob Briggs show like a year or two ago, live.
Yeah. I think it had more to do with them not liking the temporal war in general. That could be, Michael. That could be.
All right. So I'm going to briefly touch on this because people can feel pretty political about the vaccine situation, but it's a valid question, and that why take a vaccine like AstraZeneca that has been pulled worldwide and the Moderna mRNA has never been tested safely, the trials only efficacy. My son and I don't always see this eye to eye either. I'm not afraid of the mRNA viruses. I'm not afraid of those vaccines because for those of us in our age group, year one, we were dying if we got sick, just hands down. I mean, this was a get out of jail free card. Okay.
Yep.
I actually got COVID this year in January, and it was not no danger of dying, but I'll tell you the most miserable I've ever been. So when you got a virus vaccine out there like mRNA, they'd actually begun work, believe it or not, on for SARS on it when they thought the bird was going to escape Asia and didn't.
Right.
And then set it aside because there was no money in it. Okay. They rushed it to market using minimal trials. I'm not afraid of it. I took it because I didn't want to die. And I realize there's some people out there who didn't take it because they didn't want to take the risk. But I will freely acknowledge that it is impossible, 100%, to say that it's completely safe because most of the issues that we have with prescription pharmaceuticals take years to uncover.
Yes.
You can't have a drug that the entire world took 4 years ago for the very first time and tell me that when I'm 75, 15 years from now, that, oh, you know what? Nothing's ever going to haunt you for the remainder of your life. There's very likely going to be real consequences. Do I think that those consequences, no. Do I hope that those consequences are still less than the price of admission of getting it in year one? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But I don't buy into, it's 100% safe. And so my hope is, and I don't know how it's going to work because the RNA vaccine, RSA or whatever, that vaccine, RSV, is one of these type of mRNA things.
Right.
My hope is that they don't just assume that vaccines created with that formula can get carte blanche access to the public. I'm hoping that they are in fact going to force someone else because the FTC was or FDA was quite well known. It took 16 years to get from your first trial to being over the counter or prescription. So I'm hoping that they don't use that as profit as an excuse not to do further research. But at the same time, I recognize for me anyhow that I did take a risk. I would take it again in my personal circumstance. But I don't buy into, I don't go to one extreme to the other. I'm right in the middle because I will firmly admit that I have no idea what I did to myself and what price I may have to pay afterwards.
Right.
It was a judgment call that I had to make at the time it fit for me. And everybody else has something very similar. Normally, I don't get into that kind of stuff on the channel, but we are all human beings, especially Gen 1. We all do this.
Absolutely.
The decisions that we made during the pandemic, Gen 1, defined the rest of our life.
Absolutely.
No matter which, because we couldn't do everything. We couldn't play both sides of the coin. We had to make one choice or the other, and those decisions changed our lives. Okay.
Right.
we don't know medically what those decisions did to our lives.
Yep.
But I can tell you that socio and economically, my family and I, in probably one of the worst cases of survivor's guilt I've ever felt, we came out of the pandemic so much better in a position out of it than we were in. Work from
Right.
home, the work-life balance, reconnecting with your family again,
Absolutely.
recognizing, including your employers, recognizing that, hey, you know what? Work is not number one.
Right.
It's number
Right.
two. And we now know that if necessary, we'll quit and we'll do something else.
Yes.
Because we have changed. Some of us didn't have that. The first responders and the younger people, unfortunately. I mean, I did my years in retail and stuff like that. Their hands were tied if they had to
Yes,
feed.
they were. Yes, they were.
But the things that we as Gen 1 chose have shaped the remainder of our lives for better or for worse.
Yep.
And just like we're the only ones in Star Trek that understand Gen 1, we're the only ones in this whole political mess and virus mess and stuff that understand what other Gen 1 people are about, what the other baby boomers are about in that thing. Because whatever we did affects baby boomers, it affects us differently than it would affect my son, the millennial.
Yep. Absolutely.
Now, unfortunately, if he also took the vaccines with us, so 15 years for him puts him at 45.
Right.
So he might actually have a ticket that's due well in advance of mine.
Yep.
But I don't think he'd do it differently again either. It was just too damn scary.
Right.
So, all right, folks. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up for this week. I want to thank you all for joining. Please check back again in 2 weeks. And I want to throw a shout out before you all disappear. There's a live stream next week at this time on my other channel, Made for TV. We're going to be doing a watch party on the Norliss tapes,
Yes.
a 1970 made-for-TV horror movie by Dan Curtis, George Matheson. This is the movie that really explains to you why Kolchak the Night Stalker didn't survive.
Yep.
So join us next week, 4 p.m. Central Time. Would love to have you. If it works out well, we'll do this again. If not, you've wasted nothing. So thank you, everybody. Please take care of yourselves, and we'll
Thanks,
be.
y'all.
God bless, guys.
Take care, guys.